What if I told you that there was one concept in music that could help you understand harmony better and help you formulate any scale or chord that you would ever need? Well, in this video, I'm going to go over the building blocks of harmony and a principle that you'll be using for the rest of your musical career. Let's talk about intervals. An interval in music is defined as the distance between two pitches or notes. It's similar to how we might use feet or meters to measure the distance between where I'm sitting and the camera in front of me, or how we might use miles or kilometers to measure the distance between two places, like from my apartment to the local grocery store. In music, there's a detailed labeling system that we use to classify the different lengths between pitches. So let's take a look at that system right now. In Western music, we have a 12-tone system, meaning we have 12 distinct pitches that can be identified separately from each other. In this graphic, I have 7 of the possible 12 intervals laid out. Below them, I have the amount of half steps it would take to go from the root to each separate interval. Notice that we classify each of these intervals in 2 parts, using a number and a quality of either major or perfect. This combination of major and perfect intervals happens to form the major scale, a very common and useful scale that will come in handy in the future. Now let's add in the remaining 5 intervals. You can see that these happen to lay in between almost all of the 7 intervals that we originally had. Notice that we now have the qualities minor and diminished to mark the difference between 2 intervals using the same number, like a major third and minor third, or a perfect fifth and a diminished fifth. Also note that each of the minor intervals happen to be 1/2 step below their major or perfect counterparts. In addition to the major, minor, and diminished qualities we have present, there is one last quality called augmented that applies only to the perfect 4th and 5th intervals. The augmented 4th and 5th are a 1/2 step above each of its perfect counterparts. Take special note that those augmented intervals overlap with what were previously labeled as the diminished 5th and minor 6th. Now that we have the names of the intervals down, let's take a look at how this would manifest on the piano. Here I have part of the piano roll laid out with all 12 of the intervals written into each note in shorthand. I'm using the key of C in this example as our root. Now what if you wanted to figure out how to play a natural minor scale in this key? Well, all you would need to know are the intervals that make up that particular scale, which in this case is going to be a root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6th, and lastly a minor 7th. Tie it up with the octave, and there you go, your natural minor scale. Pretty straightforward, right? Now let's do a simple chord next, say a major triad. Again, we would just need to know what intervals make up the triad, which in this case are a root, major 3rd, and a perfect 5th. And that's it. Now let's take a look at how differently it manifests on a guitar, but how the process stays exactly the same. In this example, I'm using the G position based off the 6th string as my root. A couple of things to note is that the guitar is laid out quite differently than the piano, and as you can see in this example, not all of the notes are lined up on one string. So let's take the same natural minor scale we constructed on the piano and build it on the guitar. Again, we'll need a root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6th, and lastly a minor 7th. Then once again we have our natural minor scale. It's pretty straightforward like the piano, but the only real difference is how it's laid out on this particular instrument. Now let's do a major triad as well. Again, we'll need a root, a major 3rd, and a perfect 5th, and there it is. Note that on the guitar we are doubling and even tripling a couple of the intervals to fill out the sound which is typical for the instrument. I want to tell you a story about how intervals unlocked a whole new world for me. Back in college, I was taking an independent study with my mentor at the time, and he was showing me some bossa nova guitar voicings. We got to some chord that I didn't know, so he told me to move something like the 5th down a 1/2 step from a voicing I had already had. At that moment, I froze because I realized after all the years I had played guitar, I never took the time to actually figure out how the intervals were actually laid out on the instrument. I just learned a chord and memorized it as a whole. It was pretty embarrassing, to be honest, but it was a good, humbling lesson. So that day we went over the intervals that made up all the different chords that I already knew, and then he showed me how I could take those same chords and move one or two specific intervals to make some new ones that we would use to play some of the material we were going over. In time, it occurred to me that at its core, every single scale or chord on any and all of the instruments that I played were just a series of intervals, and the only thing I really needed to know was which intervals made up whatever I was trying to play, and then how it was laid out on the instrument itself. When I understood and accepted it plainly like that, I was no longer intimidated by any new scale or chord that would pop up when I would learn new material. Everything felt like it was within my reach, and it's within your reach too. I hope that you were able to learn something from this video, whether this concept was totally new or just a quick review. Please like, hit subscribe, and hit the notification bell to keep up with more music education content I'll be putting out. So with that being said, take care and be good.